kid who doesn't have a lot of social outlets, math becomes his whole identity. He's good at it, things like that, and will kind of get a little too into it sometimes, I guess. So you were describing maybe the kid who shows up on the first day and says, I'm the best parkour person in the whole world, like everyone wants me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still have a couple of those, like, at some of my programs.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, we love your enthusiasm.
Even yesterday, there was one of Kenson's boy. He was like, it's super easy. It's not a problem. I can easily jump from here to there. And I was like, well, I've never done it, but I think I can do that.
Right. And I'll talk a little bit about executive functioning, one of them being self-awareness. And it's so interesting that when they're doing that, they don't realize that they're just showing excitement as far as they're concerned. But for the fourth grader who doesn't have high social self-awareness, he's not realizing that when I say, this is really easy, the other kids might feel him as someone who brags. They might feel less good about themselves. If you're a fourth grader and the other kid is saying, this is a piece of cake, why can't you do this? You're going to feel jealous of that a little bit. What are some of the other things? Maybe a kid is really enthusiastic and they are interrupting a bit. They're coming in and kind of jumping in.
Do you guys want to?
I'm kind of curious some of your experiences. Maybe a kid who won't listen to the directions. They're really excited and they want to jump ahead to the next activity.
There are some kids that get really touchy in line sometimes.
Okay.
And they just like to make random noises and play with their voices while they're in line, and they're just very fidgety and often cut in line multiple times throughout the session.
Okay. That's helpful.
Definitely.
Impulse control in a minute.
Like, attention is like, okay, we are going to be doing this, and there's like a kid or two that they do it once and they're like, okay, what's next? I'm like, you're not done yet. But they're always like, okay, I've done this, like, what's the next thing, even though I tell them sometimes, okay, we're going to do it like 5 times or 10 times, but like they kind of like forget about it. They're like, I just want to do something else now. Like the attention span is sometimes very short.
And that's tough because you're trying to probably give them feedback or help them like work on a skill, and they did it once and they think that's activity's over.
Yeah.
If you only did one activity once, there'd be a lot of setup and takedown for you guys, right? Like, you're gonna move this. You call them props or obstacles when you
Blocks.
Equipment?
Yeah, equipment. Yeah.
And like as a coach, you're probably wanting to do some repetition and have them do it a couple times so they learn the skill. I will venture to say video games may be part of that. I don't know the specific kid, but I've definitely noticed that like with that, it's sort of like, that was really fun, next level. And I think kids, and I don't want to like do the like kids these days, but I think when you're playing a game and it's like gratification, new thing, new screen that they see when they complete a level, it can kind of translate to real life, unfortunately, I think. So, I don't know. But yeah, kind of the attention stuff. And the touching line's the same thing. Is the beauty of what you guys do too, because being active, doing what you do is perfect for those kids, right? So just kind of attention, wanting to. Do you have ever students who don't want to switch? They're really loving an activity, and you're like, okay, time to go. Does that come up in camp at all? Or?
Well, I'd say more of our work deals in class settings. We are getting into camp, so it's helpful to
do
have
both.
some of the both.
Yeah.
But I think any behavioral issue that we usually have in classes is in camps too.
Yeah.
I would say as well, it's students who fixate on things outside of the class setting. That, the student brought like I think we had a recent example where the student brings a goo, right, with them into class, and they're fixated on it all through class, and they're not focusing on the lesson, they're not paying attention to instruction and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And is that at a school where they have that goo during the day as like a fidget toy, or?
There's no, like, that's not something that we've been informed of. That's just kind of, that student has it.
You go to the school, you show up, and the kid's got goo and wants goo.
Right, wants to play with the goo.
And asks you probably 10 times in a row about it.
Yeah.
Toy, like there's Beyblades that are popular right now.
Okay.
Like, spinning tops they throw into buckets. And
yeah. And so is that's part of that is your setting if you're teaching a class at a school, and is that like an after school class?
Yeah, because then they have all of their whatevers with them, right? And then like, and to be fair, they just got out of school, so it's like.
Yes, I don't know, because most of the stuff we do when outside summer is after school.
Right.
And then so the kids they just spent all day at school and you had to listen to someone tell them what to do and to sit still and to pay attention, and so that sometimes
I'm free.
exactly. And one of the I don't teach, I just kind of help out when I have to, but then so last time I helped out in a class, and there was this boy who was just, he was excited, but he would just do absolutely anything and everything to distract the whole group. He would just drop, while Gray was teaching, he would just drop on the floor and roll around and knock other kids over and hide between the panel mats and roll. He was just, he was super excited, but had absolutely zero interest in actually following or listening or trying to do anything that the others were doing. Whatever the group was doing, he would do something else.
Well, and you named it, like the time of the day, and kind of what their food intake situation is at that time of the day, and they're thinking, all the other days of the week they go home early and watch TV. Like there's, you do have an added challenge at 3 p.m. versus 9 a.m. or something. So that's maybe something we can kind of talk about as well.
I think one type of kid that I can think of is you were mentioning this, but it one layer deeper is a kid really wants to share with you how good they are. They're not at all. They're terrible. Like they're like, check this out. This is like best lazy ball ever, and I'm like, no, that's not right. But good job. Yeah. So like breaking their heart a little, but then
But is that the kid who just says like, oh, I did the activity, what's the next one? And
maybe different.
Yeah. But sometimes it's the one that are like better at parkour in general because they got bored really fast. But then sometimes I was like, that wasn't stick.
Yeah. Or I wonder if it's like, okay, do they rush the activity? Whatever.
They're definitely more likely to cut in the line than the other kids. Because they feel that like, oh, I am doing this for a while, so I know what to do. So I just like get it the first try, and then I'm ready for the next one.
Got it. Okay.
And is it sometimes where the students, like, my mom signed me up, I don't want to do this, I want to go home.
Yep.
I'm tired. Okay. And part of that, again, that comes to the time of day you're getting it. If it was sort of at 9 a.m., that student, I think, probably, they're fresher, they're, but it's at that time of day where there maybe 4 of the other days of the school week, their pattern, their schedule is to go home. And so for a kid with ADHD or autism or a similar profile, changing schedule is really hard, and they are going to fixate. If it's not good, there's probably kids who are like, so you said you had a kid who walked away from the group once, and it's just like, I'm going home.
That was
it summer?
Actually, yeah. Thank you. Another, the worst one that I ever had was a kid who was very defiant, like challenging authority, intentionally defiant. And then I told him to sit out, and he was like, "No, I'm just gonna leave." And we were at a park, and I was like, "You can't just walk away. I have to have you here. You can sit out if you want to sit out, but you can't leave. I'm responsible for you." And he's like, "Well, too bad." Just starts walking away from the park, and then I had to run after him, and I was like, held his shoulders, and I was like, "Look, I really can't have you leave." And he's like, if you don't let me go, I'm gonna yell stranger danger." And I was like, "Great, all right, well, I'm going to you can either walk back to the park and I don't have to touch you, or if you choose to walk away, I will have to pick you up and bring you back to the park." And so he would start screaming, and I was like, "You can yell whatever you want to. It's a lie, but that's fine." And then it was very uncomfortable. It's I'm carrying a kid as he's screaming stranger danger.
And he knew
oh god.
He knew his power was in that moment. He'd blown it, right? So he didn't have a lot of other power in other areas. I guess his power was to embarrass you or have police think you were
Exactly.
taking him away or
Yeah,
something. That's
exactly.
scary, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like, all right.
It sounds like you don't get too much of the kid who's like really defiant and pushing the rules and trying to sabotage the group. Are there kids who come in and just clearly don't want to be there and they're kind of trying to make it difficult for the other kids, or more just sort of
General, no, but
yeah?
But it's also
Sometimes.
we have the very first group that I ever had was the kid that would just scream at me, I don't want to be here, and I don't, and he was completely freaked out. And I was worried that he would hit me because he was like,
Yeah, right.
he's like, oh, this is fun, this is my first class ever.
Yeah.
Oh my god. But then he didn't. I mean, we talked to his parents, and then they were like, "Yeah, no, it's not gonna work out because you cannot. I mean, this child would take up all your attention, and then you have 10 others
Right.
that hang out and don't know what to do. So if it gets too bad, or it's just not manageable, then we contact the parents, and we have in our handbook, this is step 1, step 2,
Right.
step 3, and if it doesn't work out, if your kid just really doesn't want to be in the group, then.
And it sounds like the good news is you haven't had to do that much, right? If I hear you right, you haven't had to do those.
had to remove 2 students.
Yeah, and then the one that I
Oh,
the
3,
very first
yeah.
one was you a handful in the
Yeah.
last 2 years.
I mean, I guess a lot of the conversation is just, how those 2 or 3, that's tricky. There's no right way to, that's going to be you guys calling the parents and dealing with it at kind of management level to a degree. In those situations, like the only other thought I have is if a boy's going off, sometimes bribery even works. Like if you come back, I'll let you do any activity you want. I've used that. I mean, it's not ideal to use bribery, but when it really comes to it, you can do that sometimes. The beauty though is that with parkour, with what you folks are doing, it hits really well for kids who don't learn well in other ways. I mean, you probably, if it's an after school sign up, like a kids code type of thing where it's after school choices, the really mild mannered, well behaved kid's probably going to choose chess club or coding. I mean, I'll just say it. You guys get the fun, like out there, really interesting, dynamic kids. I mean, for me, based on the work that I've done, I'd have a really hard time doing a traditional school or camp setting. My staff and I got contracted to do a field trip with a private school at our campus, and we ran it, and afterwards it was like, that went really well, but it was too easy. Like, we didn't feel like our presence had altered those kids' lives, right? And so the cool thing, I just want to emphasize, like with what you're doing, you're going to have kids who probably haven't had success in other areas. That also means that you're going to have kids who are a little more spirited, feisty, interesting, unique learners. So, I just want to switch that paradigm a little and make sure like the more spirited ones, the kid who is homesick a little or anxious or has a hard time paying attention, if you make even like a slight impact, a positive impact, that can move that kid in a really good direction. In a manner of speaking, a mild-mannered kid who kind of has social success, has academic success, stuff like that, he's going to benefit from your camp. But like the room for growth for a kid who's had some friendship challenges, who's pissed off some teachers, things like that, like you guys can make huge strides for them. So I think it's important you keep that at your forefront of like, well, if I wanted boring, you could be an SAT administrator, or like a robotics teacher or something like that. I think one of the things I always encourage is kind of remember your own mindset in that moment. Has there been a moment you can think of recently where you're kind of like, oh shit, like this kid's over here and it's a little scrambled and your room that you were supposed to facilitate in got switched and it just feels like a funky group and you're kind of scrambling to keep up with the kids. And I can remember a time for me. Yeah.
Yep. Every other time?
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it interesting, and so I think in those moments, like, it's really hard to kind of tap into how you're doing, but kind of tracking your own, like, okay, take a breath. For me, when I'm starting a power struggle, I don't usually know it in the moment, but usually what's happening is I'm feeling like my image to other adults is getting affected by the kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's this kid walking off from my group or challenging the group or telling me my camp is done. a lot of energy into this camp. So I've had a lot of moments where I've had to be like, I really check myself and be like, you know, I'm upset at this situation because this kid's affecting my image of myself or how I feel about myself. And that's tough, you know. As adults, we're kind of told like you have to be in control, things like that. Like you have to kind of run it. And when a kid's challenging that, either intentionally by being defiant or kind of unintentionally by being distracted, it affects how you feel about yourself. So I don't know what works great for you in that moment, but like taking a breath, taking a step back. Sometimes humor can work well. You really have to gauge the kid, but if the kids are just distracting or whatever, humor can put things in perspective. For me, I always kind of try to remember this quote that it's like, for a kid who's struggling, it's easier for them to say I don't want to than I can't. You know, no fourth grader is going to be like, it's late in the day, I haven't eaten well today, I'm feeling distracted, I'm not paying attention well, can you give me support? They're not going to say that. They're going to say, this is dumb, I want to go home, you know, all those things. I'm wondering, like, when you're in the schools and stuff too, is some of the pressure that you're in another person's, you're in the school's environment, there's probably teachers who are kind of still around the building that time of day?
Oh yeah. And there are other after-school clubs. There are teachers. There is the after-school, the just general after-school club.
Yeah.
Kids running around.
I usually don't feel that social pressure because I'm focused on the class.
That's
what
awesome.
we're doing.
But it's also you are super experienced, Kurt. I think how you feel, because you go into teaching mode. I mean, once Kurt is in teaching mode, you don't see or hear anything. I think for others,
I wish I could do that. Because I ran an after-school group, but I definitely felt aware of like, oh, there's other teachers in the building, and like if this kid's leaving the classroom, you know. Like,
yeah, and then you have whole groups walking past of teachers and kids, and
When that happens, I like when there's like a get.
But then you feel like, yeah, cool. They are all jealous that they're having the school stuff and you're not. I think that, at least for me, that was a big thing. It's like when people walk past, then you just think, just behave now for the next 2 minutes. Just do exactly what I tell you to do. Look like you're having fun.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, it's good you can tune that out. I think one thing though is when you're inserting into like doing a field trip for a private school or doing an after-school program, stuff like that, I have felt that like because you're not the full day teacher, so to speak, you have to build rapport really quickly. I mean, have you found that you have to kind of like jump in the first few minutes, you got to pull kids in and get them, you're kind of going into another environment.
Yeah. Well, I think what we have is like kids want to be there for the most part. So what we have to offer them and like their imagination is captured by wanting to be able to do some of the things they've seen on YouTube and stuff. So it's like, oh, cool, I can't wait to do this.
Right.
And so I don't think the buy-in for the majority is a hard sell to develop.
But then you also have to manage some sort of disappointment. I mean, I had kids that thought we're going to jump off a rooftop. And then you tell them, maybe not.
I tell them yes. No, I'm
If
serious.
they work on it.
Yeah, no, I tell them, I'm like, yeah, you guys want to jump off a roof? We can do that. And they're like, seriously? Like, yeah, you just have to get to the roof first. And then they're like, okay. So like, you know.
And then you have
but
someone that makes it up to the roof. What are you going to do?
I'm a betting man, and I'm going to say that when they stand on the edge of a roof and look down, they're going to cower back. Like
That's awesome.
or like yeah, or we'll practice like when kids say that they want to do that, we'll practice like drop rolls on the wood chips, right? And then I'm like not saying no, I'm just channeling the yes, right? Like anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But
I
that's
will
not
just, I will just tell them like, not in this class, but you should contact Khan Academy and
Yeah, and again, I mean, it sounds like you're really able to hone in during instruction and stuff like that. And
not always.
Yeah.
It's just
I
yeah.
guess for me, I'll relate also as a parent. when I've been on the playground, the times where I've had the worst interactions with my daughter is when there were other adults on the playground, and I think I was trying to get her to do something to show the other parents. So she doesn't like leaving the playground. And when I say 5, I really don't care if we stay another half hour. She's outside playing. But when I say, okay, 5 more minutes, and then the other parents see her define that, because 5 more minutes later she'll be like, how about 5 more minutes? She starts negotiating with me and stuff. So I'm just speaking from my own experiences. Like, if I was alone with her, I'd probably be like, yeah, sure, 5 more minutes. We're having fun. But I see these other parents, and I have this little instinct of like, oh, I set a limit with her. I have to reinforce that, that thing. So again, I'm just relating my own part of. It might be. I've had other times where I'm like, I really want to instruct something. I really want to teach indoor rock climbing, and this kid is interrupting me a lot and preventing. It just. We have to know that we bring our own stuff to the table. And so whatever that might be for you, like you have a really good intent on teaching a skill and one kid is distracting from the lesson or something, that can create pressure on you. Or, there's other guidance teachers around and you feel a little pressure from that. You don't because you're in tunnel vision, but...
That's not entirely, it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah. And I'm just relating... your team's really good and supports each other. I think in the summer camp, I'm guessing you guys are really talking a lot and feel supported. Larger summer camps, that can be harder. And it's one thing we challenged with our summer camp is sometimes staff feel like they need to enforce things in a way in order to show that they're a very sort of solid staff. And so they're not, we always have to say, you're empowered to be flexible. And that, find creative solutions to how to figure out a situation with a kid, those things. So I think, kind of knowing where your own stuff lies is really helpful. I'll move on. So, just that's your own personal piece of like, okay, for me, I get frustrated because I want to teach the kid things, or I feel like there's expectations from other adults, those things. I'm just really situating the fact that like how you're feeling about things really affects the kid. When I feel rushed and impatient, like we have to get to the van because it's the end of the summer camp day, that's usually where I've made situations with an anxious kid worse. And I have staff I've worked with before who just have this Jedi skill of like staying calm. There's like 15 kids and we're late getting back to camp and whatever, and they're just sort of like, okay, let's keep going to the van. And I'm like, how are you using such a calm voice? And so I've learned from a lot of the staff in our program of like how to stay chill even when stuff's kind of dicey. You have one kid who's upset, and that example might be a little more for summer camp than an after school group, because if you're after school and the kids, it's
but you still
90
need to
minutes.
Get back. I mean, you still need to, because sometimes we have larger schools where we take them somewhere else, and then we know that the parents are waiting somewhere else, and then you have to get them all together and move. So it's probably more in summer camps, but even in after school programs, you have to get them all together and move to where the parents are.
Yeah.
And then because some parents do get upset, which makes sense because they expect them to pick them up at a certain time at a certain place, and if they're not there, then they get rushed and they might be late for something.
Right.
So then the parents are upset.
Yeah. And what comes to me is that if it's a kid who's constantly like wanted to move on from other activities, I'm like, okay, I got it, I'm done. Even if he can't name it, he probably knows when an adult's getting frustrated. Because everything he does, he's always like, okay, cool, I did that, what's the next thing? And then he's got that learned experience of like, okay, adults get frustrated. Now, he maybe hasn't learned yet how to recognize that or how to be more patient. Okay, when I do an activity, I might do it 5 times in a row to get repetition and learn. But the kids you work with, they've had that they've had that experience before, and sometimes they'll even test you. The camp they went to last summer that was wilderness adventure that ended in total disaster, and they had a hard time, and mom and dad were really frustrated, and they had to leave camp early. They're going to test and see if you're safe. They're worried that's going to happen again. And they won't be able to name that for you. It might not even be conscious for them. But if they've had some like learned bad experiences where they couldn't trust adults really, like the adult became the person who was calling mom or dad, right? I mean, and I'm not saying the adult was trying to get them in trouble, but like they had a bad experience at the previous camp. So just be aware that sometimes they'll be testing you a little, and that's generally going to be the kid who on the first day is already sort of like, this is dumb, I don't like this, or you know, and again, I'm referencing camp there.
What would you recommend we do in that situation?
Have you had a kid where it's like 30 minutes in, you're like, whoa, this is gonna be tough?
Yeah.
Yes.
Camps and groups?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, I think rapport is huge there. And so, can I come back to that
Yeah.
one in a second? But like, getting that kid's personal interest and knowing in advance this is going to be a tough kid to work with. And I'll send notes after, by the way.
Oh.
I have some prepared.
Oh, great. Oh,
Feel free
great.
to jot it down. You also have it on video. But
Sorry, I hope.
I love the video. No, it's good. I probably look bad.
No, you look great.
I've got
actually.
a great face for radio, you know.
No,
That's what my mom always told me.
it's the lighting, really.
Yeah. I think I think one of the things I think having specific strategies and even up to bribery. We had a kid who impulsively said cuss words. I mean, it was borderline Tourette's, and we had a system where if he didn't cuss in the van, he got a starburst upon leaving the van. Now, by the didactics of teaching, that wasn't great, right? I mean, how is that fair for the other kids? Are we reinforcing with sugar, stuff like that? We certainly got his mom on board with that situation, but it was sort of like that we're also a special needs camp. If that kid wasn't going to make it with us, he was going to be kind of one-on-one with a behavioral aid at home. Like, this was his last shot to do it. So we made that decision of like, this is not something we normally want to do. We don't want to reinforce good behavior with sugar. It's not fair for the other kids. How are they going to feel about it? And it worked. And I think the kids basically felt like, man, if that kid getting a starburst at the end of the van ride keeps them from cussing all the time on the van, I'm okay with it. Like, surprisingly, the kid, I think the adults sometimes think kids are going to feel like it's more unfair than the kids actually feel, right? And so that hems us into like, we have to do it a certain way. What I would say, and I'll dive in more on a tricky kid in a second, but like, if it's feeling like this week's going to be a disaster unless I have some strategies for this kid, I would potentially suggest having some system in place. And in that first half hour, you might say to that kid, what is your favorite, I guess you couldn't do core activity yet because he might not know it, but like, that's where you might want to manipulate him. You know, that's where you do use a Beyblade that he can work up to. Like, okay, you really love a Beyblade, you brought it from home. Sometimes the parent will have advanced told you on the form, like, this is something that's really positive reinforcing for him. And you can just say to him, listen, if you really like Beyblades, your parent told me that on the form, they said they packed it in your backpack. If you're kind of doing positive every half hour, we can do a little Beyblade check-in. And so that way, you're not saying, if you do poorly, you're going to have to do a timeout. You're saying, I'm going to track you in every half hour if you're doing well. And it has to be, the tricky thing about that, and this is where you might use an assistant facilitator, right? If you're the lead facilitator, it's probably the assistant who's going to help out with this. But it does have to be on a regular time basis, because if it's like at the end of the day you're going to earn this, it's too far away for that kid. That kid's not going to be able to stop touching other kids in line, or that kid's, gonna, if the issue is he's defiant and he's saying, I want to go home, you might say, for every half hour that you're able to kind of participate or at least avoid saying, I'm going home now, you're going to get 5 minutes of doing the Beyblade. And it can be reinforcing as well if it's like something the other kids get pulled in on, like Mitchell's going to teach us Beyblades or something like that, where the other kids get pulled into that. It takes a lot of work. I mean, that's the balance, is like the pre-work you have to do for that one kid. Whoa, it's Monday morning. This is going to be a very long week. This kid is interrupting every 5 seconds. The prevention work you're going to have to do is a lot of work. I think by the end of the day, if you've done some prevention work, okay, every half hour there's a positive reinforcement, then you're like, okay, we're good to go. If doing that positive reinforcement is still not getting him into a safe setting with the camp, you may have to make a phone call at the end of the day and talk to the parent and see, and that's up to your policies. For us, it's usually two categories is, and this might, for a Monday after school class, it might be, does the kid continue next week? And usually my criteria is if the kid looks nominally checked into the activity, if he's like liking the activity but he's interrupting a lot, that's usually pretty workable. If he's liking the activity but he's touching other kids in line, it's usually pretty workable. If he's just adamantly, I don't want to be here, she just says, this stinks, I'm only here because my mom signed me up, or it's getting to the point where other kids are feeling physically intimidated, usually you just have to kind of, what's in the best interest of this kid? Is kind of trying to squeak our way through the week, and I'm going to have to do positive reinforcements every 5 minutes. That's a sort of the clinical threshold, so to speak. And hopefully, it sounds like once, twice, 3 times this summer, you're going to get kids where it's sort of like at the end of day 1, we're going to strategize with parents, but it may not be the right fit. I don't know. In our experience, 25% of the time, it's 75% of the time they come in and kind of good to go. 25% of the time, it's pretty dicey, pretty tricky situation. Talking with parents and strategizing with parents is going to fix it. And then in 5% of the time or 3% of the time or whatever, it's like it just isn't serving the kid's interest just to kind of keep trying to do it. I mean, when you get to the point where you're needing bribery every few minutes, that's just really hard. And I think one of the things I would say is getting away from a diagnosis paradigm. I like to think instead on impulse control, emotion regulation, flexibility, and self-awareness. And those are 4 of the emotional regulation skills that I deal with a lot. If I was a teacher, I would also be dealing with planning and working memory. Those are other things that are in there. But impulse control, that goes to your one of he's touching kids in line a lot and just needing to act out physically all the time, right? Emotional regulation. Now, what's interesting is, what about the kid who touches kids in line, but when you say, hey, stop it, he stops right away? That's pretty workable, right? In my experience, it's when, of these 4, impulse control, emotion regulation, flexibility, and self-awareness, when there's a comorbidity. Now, that's the clinical term. That's like having 2 of them, right? Anxiety and autism. And so comorbidity would be a great death metal band. Like if you're from Finland, we're the comorbidity. You can use their term intersections. I think if you can talk to kids about it a little, it's a good term to use. They need to be aware. Oops, your impulse control. I mean, this is a great chance for them to learn it in a real setting. And so, coming up with a keyword that works for them a little, rather than saying stop touching kids in line, stop touching kids in line, stop touching kids in line, which you kind of do, right? Like you're wanting to direct the group, so you're kind of trying to move the group along. And Edmund, stop touching kids in line. Edmund, stop touching kids in line. That's a behavioral manifestation. It can be helpful if you give him a word like ice cube. Like that's a keyword. And make sure he's not embarrassed by other kids. And you can kind of make it a little game even, like, Edmund, when I say ice cube, I want you to think that you're really still like an ice cube. Potentially that can work really well as a game. I'd suggest that with like 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. Those kind of games and keywords are a little harder with the 6th, 7th, 8th grader because they're a little more, it's not as cool to do that. But again, emotional regulation. Do you have kids who, if they don't get it right or they don't feel like they're doing well, they get really upset at themselves?
Yeah.
Philippe, is that like someone who comes in and they're like really into parkour and they're not getting a move, call it a move or a...
Yeah. Well,
have you had that where they stomp off from the group? What's that usually look like?
I have a kid that just starts crying.
Yeah.
Like literally like 2 tries in, he's like, this is too hard and I cannot do it, and he just like starts crying.
Yeah.
And I talk to him and like 3 minutes later he's fine again.
That's
but like he just happens sometimes like 3-4 times in class and he just like starts crying.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, that's the part where emotional regulation, what I want to reinforce is like, it's so important that he's working on that with you, because if he's doing that, there's probably a chance that comes up for him when he's doing a math problem he can't understand, or he's, trying to do a chore around the house and he forgot to do something and his mom gets, like, emotional regulation is not just happening in your class. I think what's neat is that since it's a preferred activity for them, it's something they like. You know, if he's getting upset because he doesn't understand math homework, that's a harder place to work on emotion regulation. He's just going to throw the math book and I hate math, but like he wants to do it. How incredible that he comes back to it each time too. Like that, and that's something to reinforce as well as kind of resilience. Is like, wow, you were frustrated, but you came back and you did it. And that sounds just like cheerleading, but actually what you're doing there is you're helping them learn how good it feels to stick with something. I would imagine that kid when he does schoolwork, if he doesn't get it right away, kind of, gets frustrated.
So you'd recommend that you praise the return to the activity?
Yeah. And I imagine you do. I mean, you're probably pretty psyched when he was crying 5 minutes ago and then he's trying a new activity. It's awesome. It's hard. I don't know exactly how to. I mean, that kid who puts a lot of pressure on himself, who wants to get it right a lot, that's a hard skill to learn. Like, I don't think there's a lot of because you can say to him, don't worry if you don't get it right, it's okay. Probably he kind of logically knows that, but the emotion regulation, the feelings of anxiety that he has, the way his brain works, it overrides that. I mean, it's probably, my hope is his parents aren't like, you need to be very good at parkour, athlete, or we're taking you out. Like, his parents probably tell him also, it's okay not be perfect, right? That was a misconception I had when I used to have clients who put a lot of perfectionistic pressure on themselves. I thought, their parents probably pressured them a lot. And I started just over the years seeing like that actually wasn't the case. That was kind of like a pop psychology myth I think I had bought into, of like a really kid who pressures himself a lot has parents who put pressure on themselves. And I think I'd had one or two cases where that was true, like high-powered lawyer dad who puts pressure on the kid, right? And then I started seeing these really chill parents who were not doing that and the kids still had pressure. And it's just, that's the sucky thing about anxiety. I mean, that kid doesn't want to feel like every parkour move he gets, it has to be perfect the first time, but his brain is kicking in and saying, you got to do this great. Stepping back, I do think that media, YouTube, watching people do perfect parkour moves, stuff like that, like kids have more pressure on themselves now, body image wise, what they see. I mean, I hate it when my daughter sees stuff on YouTube, but that's why I took her off YouTube, but it's ubiquitous. I mean, kids get that pressure. Another thing is flexibility is kind of that kid you worked with, it might be that he had an inflexible approach to things. I don't know him. So again, these 4 areas, if I'm saying impulse control, I'm thinking ADHD, right? If I'm thinking emotion regulation, the overlap there is often going to be anxiety or depression. Because if you have a hard time emotionally regulating yourself and each day that's how it feels, it creates kind of a depressive, like, this sucks. Like, I feel like if I don't have something go well, I feel really down on myself. Flexibility is often where I see autism emerge. The clients I work with a lot have very binary thinking. Either it's one way or another. And so for the young man you worked with, there's a chance that he has that inflexibility of mind of like, if I'm doing parkour, I have to be the best at it. What's interesting is that if he had that inflexibility, but he had good emotional regulation skills, you wouldn't see the crying. You would see him sort of like being inflexible, wanting to get it really right, and then kind of being able to handle it if he doesn't. I would venture the guess that a lot of pro athletes have very high inflexibility. Like, you can't be a flexible, go with the flow person and still want to be the absolute best cyclist in the world. And, you listen to pro athletes, they are driven a lot of times, right? But they somehow don't have that profile also of being very frustrated if it doesn't go that way. They're going to try again and again and again. Steph Curry is focused on being the best outside perimeter shooter in the world, and he just shoots, and practices. If he misses one, he doesn't get down on himself somehow. Or if he's having a streak of missed shots, he somehow doesn't let that get to him. So I think it's interesting how pro athletes actually have a high level of inflexibility. which for a kid who also cries a lot, that doesn't work well. You know, if that kid has the physical strength or kind of the wherewithal to be a great climber or parkour athlete or gymnast, and he's able to master the emotional regulation piece, that inflexibility could be a really good skill. Does that make sense? So it's sometimes these things are, you know, emotional regulation, it kind of runs through all of it. And what I'm saying is, like, usually if you can start thinking of the executive functioning areas instead of as like a behavior, because a lot of times what we think about is this kid walks off from group or this kid gets frustrated, because that's what we see. That's the behavioral output, right? And what I'm encouraging, whether it's for your own self to kind of understand it, is to think about these 4 areas. Okay, he's got an impulse control executive functioning area that I can teach. And the impulse control issue manifests himself with him grabbing kids in line, right? And so if you can get to that point with a student where you're saying, hey, I notice that you have a hard time controlling your impulses. How can we have a code word like ice cube that helps you remember in that moment delayed gratification? It's going to be really fun to tap this kid on the head, and he's going to giggle, and I'm going to get an output from that, right? You know, they're touching other kids in line because it's fun, and the other kids squirm and say, knock it off. It's an interaction thing a lot of times. I've had a few kids who touch kids in line just because they want to provoke and see if they can get the other kid upset. I'm curious, when you said a kid who touches a lot in line, when you think of that kid, was your sense that he was doing it to like piss off other kids and get under their skin? Because I've seen that, or I've also seen the one where they touch in line just because it's just, there's a kid right there and I'm just gonna... You've seen both?
Well, what I've seen is that when kids will touch each other in line, it's usually stimming themselves and wanting to play. It's just like play invitations. And then what happens is some kid will not want that, and then play provoking becomes physical retaliation. and then that becomes the problem.
Yeah. And the other kid gets frustrated.
Yeah, and then a fight may happen. And then that will but that's roughhousing in general.
Yeah.
It started fun and then it became not fun.
And is some of the lining up part, because they're really excited, they're like coming out of the school day and they're lining up from the cafeteria to go to your after school class?
Typically when we get done with the school program, we usually have a moment where kids can have a decompression time and eat snack and just kind of, do something in an area. Where
It's totally different based on school or the setup for how people come into the camps.
Yeah. I mean, because if you have ADHD, lines are the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because you're waiting in that moment. You have a high physical proximity. In some instances, also, you're not sure quite what's coming next. Like, you're lining up, you're going to go do an activity, but you're not sure what's coming next. So there can even be anxiety or kind of anticipation. Excitement and anxiety really form from the same part of our brain. So, like, the kid I've seen a lot of kids who are really, really excited, and then it goes right into anxiety. We had that happen on the first day of camp. Kids had a really successful summer last summer, and he's been looking forward to camp again the whole year. And then he comes in and he's really excited, and then the one kid he really likes from last year isn't there, or something, his counselor's different, something's not right. And in a heartbeat, it goes from the most excited, kids jumping out of the car, running up, so ready for camp, and we're excited and stuff, and then something, unpredictable, and then it's just, all that excitement just transfers to anxiety, which sucks. Because excitement's great, but anxiety is not as fun to work with. So again, I've got those 4 emotional sort of executive functioning, emotion regulation, impulse control, flexibility. The self-awareness part also comes in. What about the impulse control kid, the kid who's in line, who knows that he's not supposed to touch other kids? He really likes and respects you guys, and he knows if he taps the kid in front of him in the head, he knows that's not seen well. It's interesting because that kid still is excited to poke. He doesn't do it though because he really cares about what his perception is, things like that. Again, with autism, there's not a lot of self-awareness. A lot of what we teach kids is like how is that perceived by others? When I'm working with teenagers with autism, I have to let them know that if they like a girl or a boy or whatever, texting them multiple times per day does not help. Okay, they're not aware of that. They're like, well, if I texted once and it didn't work, maybe 10 times, right? And they don't have that self-awareness to know, like, how does that other person perceive that? Okay, that's a little creepy. That is over pursuing, not good, right? So, what I just want to get back to is every person in the world has executive functioning deficits or gaps or whatever. I know, I've got mine. When you have that crossover, when you have the impulse control and no self-awareness, that's when you're seeing things come up. And I'm just presenting that as a framework, a way for you as a teacher to think about it, and sort of like, that's a moment to kind of maybe let that kid know, hey, when you poke the other kid in the line, how's that kid making that other kid feel? Things like that. It can be a teachable moment sometimes. It's probably a little easier in a summer camp setting to do that, where you really are digging in and you have them for a longer day. So I think it's really important. We have to beat this thing of like all the kids are the same. Like, no, we know from equity that fairness is not the same as that. That kid who's more spirited, or from the form, or from like 2 minutes, they've already poked another kid, you've got to be that kid's best friend. And it feels a little unfair. Sometimes you're like, well, this is getting me away from some of the other kids. My counter argument to that would be is if you don't preload with rapport building, then you're going to be taking away from the other kids as well, and it's going to be when you can't control that, right? So find out if that kid loves Pokemon, find out that kid's favorite character, because later in the day, if that kid is losing it a little, you saying, hey, isn't Charizard a cool Pokemon? That might cut through the static noise. That might be the word they need to hear in that moment of like, oh, you remember Charizard? Yes, he is an awesome guy. Charizard is able to, and you've got him distracted. Younger, you're not going to be able to distract a pissed off 7th grader with Pokemon talk generally. But the younger they are, the distractibility, the tapping into their interest. And so it almost becomes like you're a spy, you are prepping for later, you're gathering information that's going to come in handy for you later. Another thing that I think to do is really review the schedule and what's coming up next. I think as facilitators, sometimes we're kind of excited to get into it. Sometimes we might verbally say what the schedule is. I would encourage, at least for your summer camps, if you have small whiteboards. I didn't do this forever, partially because my handwriting's bad, but writing out what they're going to be doing can lower the anxiety for kids, and for an impulse control kid, it can kind of break out the day. So most camps don't do that. I know we didn't do it until the last few years. I would just sort of say, okay, after lunch we're going to play camouflage, followed by that we're going to go on a hike, followed by that. And I thought that verbal announcement, that's what I had always learned as a summer camp counselor. You just get in front of the kids and you're like, all right, we're doing this, and it's kind of, but having that visual reminder, having a whiteboard where you just write out the schedule is really huge for the kids. So that to me is a really big prevention. I think for a kid who you notice is a little bit high energy or a little bit out of your bell curve, finding their peer is important as well. So finding the rock star kid who's going to be pretty patient, stuff like that. In the special education world, it's called a peer mentor. You can kind of, you don't need to label it, but maybe it's a kid who's done your camper group before. Maybe it's a kid who you just have a sense they have a good leadership role. You could pair them off with that spicier kid. Because do you want the kid who pokes and provokes paired off with the kid who's easily frustrated? No. Because that kid, the kid who pokes and provokes is like, ooh, that's someone easily provoked. So structuring your group arrangements and kind of that's another prevention thing you can do. Again, it feels a lot like, why am I changing around the group setting for this one kid? But my argument would be like, if that kid's gonna make it in your camp, you might as well stack the odds. Again, at the end of the first day, if you've like paired him with the most patient, awesome kid in the camp, if you've given him schedule really well, if you've learned his rapport, and he's still having a hard time in camp, that's kind of like where you're talking to Kurt and right? They're calling you guys and we're sort of like, I did a lot of prevention. I did a lot of things to make this work, and it was still very difficult for the kid. So prevention doesn't prevention doesn't solve it all. And I actually have to teach that. Some of the staff I work with in my camp, they're special ed teachers, and they're kind of used to having their same setting all day. And in camp, it's invariably going to be a little more free-flowing. I mean, that's the beauty of a summer camp. That's the beauty of parkour, is you're going to change it up a little. You're going to change the activities, things like that. Another thing I would really like to emphasize too is like really trying to get yourself out of that behavioral output lens. So rather than stop touching in line, trying to give specific feedback. Okay? And this is hard for me sometimes to remember, but saying have your hands in a safe, have your hands in a good place is better than saying don't touch, right? You're saying what not to do, but that kid still doesn't know what to do with his hands. So sticking a fidget toy in his hands during lineups or stuff like that can be helpful. It's very hard to have a system for taking a break, partially because if you've got your summer camp going and you've got your lead and your assistant or your co-facilitators, if you're structuring like this one kid's gonna need a break every half hour or hour to do fidget toy, that's not easy, because then you have you with the whole group and your assistant with this one kid, right? So you're really gonna have to figure out how to situate that, and you're gonna have to decide is like, if this kid really needs on every hour kind of 10 minutes to decompress, how to do it in a way that doesn't affect the group. Can we get it where at first the assistant facilitator is going with them, but then it's become a norm and they know and don't call it a timeout. You can call it kind of chill zone or something like that. And how many instances do you feel like your kids would benefit from a pre-planned break? Like you have 1 out of 10 kids, 1 out of 20?
Well, I don't know a ratio, but I have noticed that when I go to give discipline, if I structure it in a positive way and say, like, you're really keeping the rest of the group from learning, so I'd like you to sit over here, and when you're ready to come back in and join us, then you can come in, but make sure that when you come back in, you're ready to learn and you're gonna help us learn by not distracting others, right? And that's been a good way to, instead of like, go sit out 5 minutes, right? Which I still do if it's like, if I'm in a moment of like, okay, just get out of here, you guys over here, like, yeah.
Well,
But
a couple of things, yeah. And so maybe now is, so I've talked about some of the prevention stuff. Again, I can't emphasize like building a rapport, finding out right away who's the kid who's going to challenge this group a lot, and how can I learn exactly what his or her interests are, and really use that as my spy tool. How writing down the visual schedule, I think, is something that has really improved our camp. It is kind of a pain to break out that whiteboard, but they're $5. They come about this size, and for some of my kids, just seeing what activities they're going to do.
could we just print off the routine and just put it on the clipboard? And
Yeah,
then be like,
as long as the
right here.
kids can see it, as long as they get to review it. Again, that kid who's not flexible, stuff like that. It would also, for a kid who's trying to skip ahead, it'd create norms for what it is. It's like, you can, instead of just saying, no, we're still doing this activity, you can just say, as the schedule says, we're doing this one from 10 to 10:30. One of the tricky things is that it does affect how you can be as an instructor, because sometimes you want to change up the activities based on what works for your group. So you might want to say, like, instead of like blocks from 10 to 10:30, you're going to say option time 1. So that leaves you the room to still pick what you're doing during option time 1. It doesn't get you locked into doing slackline or doing blocks or doing something like that or doing a row. But it segments their day. I think it kind of creates less anxiety. It's not like, okay, I'm getting dropped off and we're starting activities, and the next point in the day, I'm saying, like, if you're giving a reason. I like that you're saying, I want you to take a break because it's hard for us to teach the other kids. The funny thing is as a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, they are hearing, I'm a fuck up and the other kids don't like me. A little bit. Now, you didn't say it. Like, I knew what you meant.
Exactly
you meant, like,
what I said.
okay. That's how you were saying something really good of like the logic is I'm not mad at you. I just want to make sure we can teach these skills. But just be aware if that kid's already in a dysregulated spot and you say you're affecting how I can teach the others, or you're pulling back the group. And part of that is that learned crap they've got from other teachers. That they're always the kid who holds back the class. Or like the teachers, all right, Reginald, go over this again. You know, like Reginald, get your pencil out. Okay, you can't find your pencil, Reginald. You lost your pencil again. And so they have this learned thing of like, I'm messing up the rest of the group. So it's just, you know, getting them apart from the others. I think when you do the rationale of here's why I want you to take a break, it sounds funny, but you have to make it about them. Because logically, yes, you got to take a break so the group can do better. We want to perform better as a group. The one thing I've just seen kids get stigmatized by that, of like, oh, the groups could do good without me. And then the kid sometimes has that choice of like, well, I guess I'm not doing well for the group. I'm going to take it to the logical extreme. I'm going to show them really how bad I can mess up. I've had kids like that. This is like, if you're already feeling like you're going that way. And again, it's a learned pattern. It's sort of like, you know, it is hard to redirect, get back on track for a kid versus I'm gonna be the class clown. I'm gonna embrace this identity. Oh, I'm holding up the group. Let me show you how I can hold up a group. Like you think let me show you my group hold up skills. I'm speaking as a kid who held up a lot of groups when I was young. I got some ADHD going on. So I think like getting them apart from the group. Another intervention strategy is like giving a lot of choices. Like letting them know that you're not dictating what they're going to do during their time out. That shows them that it's not punishment. And again, what you're doing is you're flipping the script on what they've experienced before, which is usually mom and dad are putting me in time out. It's because they're really pissed because I grabbed little sister's hair again and I'm in trouble and they're putting me here and I have no choices. I'm being controlled because I can't keep my hands. When I'm mad at little sis, I pull her hair. Or a teacher pulls me aside. I mean, I hate this active kids lose recess. And that is the dumbest thing. That's a truly American thing that we do. I'm sorry, as a German, you must think we're nuts with that.
It's just insane.
You're too fidgety, therefore you can't go outside and play. You know, and again, the teacher knows that that's the reinforcer for the kid. In that moment, that feels like the only way the teacher can get through to the kid. You know, but I think if you can give choices, hey, we're gonna go over here. You just sort of say, hey, again, the only difference I can occur when you're framing it, the only difference I would say is like that kid in that moment is just thinking about himself. So you have to say, rather than we're gonna go over here so the group can learn this more, it's gotta be we're gonna go over here because I think you can learn this skill better if you get a 10-minute break first. Like I can tell, and prop them up, praise them. Like even in that moment, you're like, God damn it, kid, this is the third time I've told you not to cut in line. You know,
I think that's genius.
Yeah, I mean, shine them on a little. I know it feels a little bit dishonest or whatever. In that moment, you'd be like, God dang it, kid, this is the 5th time I had to talk to you in the last hour. Shine them on and be like, I can tell you're about to get this challenge. You're almost there. When I'm almost to a challenge and I'm feeling pressure, I like to take a 10-minute break. So what you're doing there is you're normalizing it. You can also say, hey, at Khan Academy, when we're getting frustrated with the challenge, we like to take a little 10-minute break and come back to it. With that boy who gets very easily frustrated by challenges, if you see the tears starting to come a little, it could be an incredible learning moment. He's trying to line up and get it again. And you're like, oh, hey, I bet you're gonna like this one better if you just take 2 minutes over here to breathe. Like I can tell you know how you get worked up. I don't know if that kid could hear that. You know, he might not admit that he cries when he doesn't get a challenge. But like, how cool if that kid could learn, like, if I want to try something hard, I got to take a few deep breaths, get my shit together so that I don't cry. You know, so space away, not in front of others. You know, using fidgeting toys, things like that. Just normalizing it. As much as that kid can feel like this is a really good strategy I'm doing, you're going to teach that kid a life skill of when I get frustrated, I'm starting to learn to take breaks, and I'm learning that they're not bad things. You guys just have an incredible opportunity to flip that switch with, I get to play with a fidget toy a little, I get to chill, and then I came back, and lo and behold, I was able to Kurt was right. I was able to do the activity better. Like I got things around, or like I came back and then when they come back, let's say it's a line pusher or line poker, right? You've got to give them a ton of praise the minute they're back. Like, came back, I'm like, whoa, Ben, you're not poking the line, thank you so much. And you can do it quietly. You don't have to like overdo it. The other kids are gonna be like, why is that kid getting praise for just not poking? Right? I get that. It feels funny, but that kid has to have this like awesome positive feeling when he comes back from the break, so that the next time you do it, he remembers like, okay, I'm back, you know. Another thing that's important that I forget about a lot is like, I'm trying to run a group. I am sometimes like a drill sergeant, so it's like, stop, don't poke. Let's get in line. Things like that. And again, you're not giving specific feedback to that kid, so when you're leading up to that, an intervention thing is, Reginald, we talked about not poking, right? You've got to give them the alternative. Reginald, could you put your hands right by your side? Let's play a game. You keep your hands by your side for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, go. Like almost catch them off guard, right? That kid has heard stop, don't poke people in line a zillion times. If he's doing it with you guys in an active setting, he probably does it 10 times more often when he's transitioning from math to science or going to his locker to get stuff or things like that. So he's heard it before. I think also with a frustrated kid, a kid who's saying, I want to go home, kid is saying this sucks, you know, stuff like that. Positive reminders are really helpful. So if there's things they really look forward to, like an afternoon snack that's really fun, or a field trip, or an activity they did last week, give them those reminders, because they may need that kind of in the moment, like, oh yeah, we're doing blocks next. And it also gives them a reason to do well, right? If they're like, if I take this 10-minute break, you like it where it's like, if I take this 10-minute break, the other kids are gonna feel better because I'm not poking them. Kurt's gonna feel better because I'm not interrupting the group. You'd want it relationship-based. In our work environments, that's why we do stuff. Like I do stuff because I like my coworkers and I want to impress them and I want to be on a good team. I don't do it because I'm gonna get to do a neat activity at the end of the day. Also because I get paid. So, but you know, in the day-to-day, I think most of the things I do are because I like my team, I like the clients I work with, the parents I work with, I want to get a good impression from them. I want them to feel good about my work. But when you're a 10-year-old, and when you're a 10-year-old with limited self-awareness or limited impulse control, you've got to know what you're working towards right in that moment. In some instances, you might even need to jack it up a little more. So instead of just, we're going to do slackline in half an hour, this is, oh, I didn't like that one, it didn't work, I couldn't get the activity, things like that. You might have to say, we're doing slackline in half an hour. Listen, if you hang with this activity, I don't know what you can reinforce there. I'll let you go first for slackline. Is that something you can offer, or does that start to feel unfair? I don't know.
You know, there's a lot of times there's like a game that we can be like, you get to be the next person who picks, you know, who is this character in the game, or you get to shout out the commands for the game, or
right.
You know, you get to be the hunter, and yeah. Free time is also a thing that we use, I think, a lot.
Yeah. Do you have instances where the kid is kind of off from the group and having a hard time re-engaging?
Yeah.
Where they're kind of taking time out and they're just like, I'm done for the day?
Typically, and then what I learned this from Evan. I'll go over and I'll just, without, like, maybe I'll say something, maybe not, but I'll go over with the ball and I'll just start playing catch with them, like, and then it's usually, and then I'll be like, hey, just try standing on one foot or something, and then after it takes like 2 minutes, and then they're like good again, and I'm like, hey, you want to get some water? Come back in, and then they're like, yeah, like it's like micro and getting them involved again.
It's just kind of distracting rather than going over and being like, I mean, a really great thing about that is that you're not talking about the, hey, why are you upset, or why did you about the line there? You're just completely distracted, like, hey, do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And that's awesome. I think not having it be lecturing is important. And me, I'm a therapist, so I'm like, really have had to untrain myself. I've had a few times where I had a kid kind of calm down and did a great job, and then I had to put one more sentence in there and that got him bored and mad again. If I would have just left it at a 1 minute, hey, that was great, you handled it, we would have had a really cool conversation. But I tried to get to therapy. I talked for 2 minutes. He started to get bored. He started to get pissed off again. So again, that's my thing that I've had to unlearn is not lecturing. And I don't know if this comes up for you, but you just want the kid to see it, right? Usually when you're lecturing, you're just like, can't you see that you are doing awesome? You're doing great at this. If you could just not poke people in the back of the head in the line, like your friends would like you so much more. Like you just want them to see that, right? And so you're verbally trying to get them to see it, and it doesn't work.
Would you ever say that to them? Be like, you do so good in class, and yet, like, if only you didn't poke someone in the head all the time, your friends would like you so much more, and you would be able to participate more.
I want to say that to them. It's just like, and their parents, listen, I've talked to a lot of these parents, their parents feel like if this light could just go on for him, right? And I've heard so many parents on the phone say he's his own worst enemy, kind of like that. A lot of times that's the flexibility one, the one needing to be perfect. Here's this kid who's pretty social, he's athletic, he likes to do a lot of things, but he feels like everything has to be perfect. So it becomes his own worst enemy. He puts so much pressure on himself. If he could just kind of relax and be good with what he's doing, he'd be fine. So it is really hard because you just want them to get over that one hurdle. But again, I think in that moment it's kind of hard to just say, hey, when you poke people in line, you want them to know. A lot of times they do know, though. And so rather than being like, oh, if I didn't poke them in line, I'd have more friends, it unfortunately can be like, I poke people in line and that's why, and I've tried to stop before and I couldn't do it. I'm just so excitable. And so it's tricky.
So one of the things I heard you, if I'm right, about the takeaway is for kids who have trouble attending in line and waiting, then if you give them a manipulative or something to do with their hands, then that's a good way to
and you may
practice juggling, catch, or like there's like this one game where it's like you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this one starts off 1 off, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, like I don't know.
Well, and potentially having the whole group do that could be a prevention one if you have a lot of squiggly line kids. In some instances, though, doing the activity or, one of the ones I like is would you rather? Would you rather eat monkey brains or horse poop or something like that? And if you have your facilitator just doing with that kid right next to that kid, because I think one of the strategies is really using your co-facilitators a lot. You want to both be up in front of the class, right? But having a strategy amongst your team where one person is with that identified kid, it is good. And sometimes pulling in, so it's your one facilitator with the one squiggly kid plus a peer mentor. So then you have one facilitator by 2 kids. And they're kind of always by them in line. And when they're starting to get fidgety, it's, okay, hey, Reginald, would you rather, and hopefully that kind of gets Reginald off the topic of that. But what I've seen a lot with groups and camps and stuff is you just have 2 adults and they're kind of both at the head of the line, and then every time Reginald acts up, one of the adults has to walk to the back of the line and deal with Reginald, and then they walk back to the front and stuff like that. So you folks are spatial people, you do parkour, you're used to kind of how things are situated. I encourage you use strategies where your assistant facilitators in the back of the line, or you have your big time peer mentor guy in the back of the line, and you can trust him to kind of not get distracted. He's going to hold it up. And in the middle of the line, you've got your assistant. I assume in summer camp, you've got a college age guy who's kind of helping out sometimes or stuff like that. Have him standing right by Reginald. And that prevents you, if you've got a college age assistant. I only know this because I saw you guys at Seward Park one time. It was like a lead facilitator and then a younger guy. Yeah. And so you, as the lead, are in the front. You're giving instruction, and you're not having to say, "Hey, Reginald, stop poking." Right? You've got. So I think doing a little bit over planning, doing some line strategy, letting your college assistant know, listen, for this Monday, for this first day of camp, I want you walking in line with Reginald, because we had him last summer, he really likes to poke in line. And again, I also do say sometimes bribe. That is against sort of a lot of instruction. But if it's a kid who's really stomping off from group or starting to become very mean towards the other kids, I don't know what that bribe might look like. I don't know what kind of special things you guys might have. We have in our camp on Wednesdays is Slurpee Day. We go to 7-Eleven. So on Wednesdays mornings, if a kid's acting up, we will say, hey, remember, we got Slurpee Day today. And we're not giving them a special treat, but we are sort of like, dude, do okay, because you know. And we hate taking away we don't like to, use sugar as reinforcement, but if that's going to get you, if it's halfway through Monday morning, you're like, I might be having to call this kid's parents. Like, I don't know how this is going to go. That positive reinforcement might be enough. It may be worthwhile, because the fidget toys can work some, but for a pissed off kid, the fidget toy might just be something they throw at another kid.
Right.
So I might suggest that you get, like, PCC has these sugar-free, or they're like cane sugar lollipops. Get a few of those, have them in your trick bag, and for a really pissed off kid, be like, listen, it's not something we always do. I know that, like, from a fairness to the classroom point of view, that doesn't seem great to do it, right? You're telling a kid who's acting up, like, listen, man, in an hour or two, if I'm feeling good about how you're being, if you quit telling Ronald that he's a crappy parkour athlete, this is really the kid who's being defiant. Oh, you suck at this, I'm much better. Really a kid where you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And you're trying to get him through the day. I think a cane sugar lollipop in an hour, hey man, I got this. And they're healthy, and you got to make sure that the parent doesn't have on the form, like, may not eat sugar at all. But most parents I've met, even the ones who are really, really health food conscious, they're not going to be pissed if a kid gets a cane sugar lollipop from PCC, and it's a little bit of a, I do think for that kid where they're really acting up and you're having to intervene a lot, bribing is an okay thing. And saying, hey, later in the afternoon, I got this, it cost you 50 cents at PCC and it might save your day. And in a way, the way I like to think about that philosophically is that kid is working so much harder to be in a group. Doesn't get it's a 25-cent lollipop. Let's give it to him, right?
And what are the tolerance of the group who's, who has to deal with that kid? Like, how do you call out? How do you balance those scales? Like,
the other kids are like, that's the kid who's been interrupting all day and he gets the lollipop.
Yeah.
I would explain that it isn't totally fair. And it's interesting. I haven't had kids feel like when I've done something. I mean, really, giving a fidget toy and giving a break isn't fair. You're giving extra attention. This kid's getting to go over here. But I think a lot of the kids realize, like, hey, if this kid's doing a little better, I'm going to have more fun, or something like that. I don't quite have the chance to tell you how to tell a kid.
Actually, I think what you just said was
that cool? Yeah.
Like you just said, if this kid was treating us nicer and or whatever,
make it an easier day.
Yeah, I think we would all be having a lot more fun if he wasn't being such a jerk.
Because I do think it is fair. It is fair that the other kids, you don't want to. The other kids know that kid's having a hard time, and naming it and being real with the other kids is all right. Now, you don't make a big announcement and say, Reginald's having a hard day, we're going to have a little bit of a different system for him. You may see him have a lollipop later today. Because then it's like a big group decision. But generally, when I've done that, like the kid who I gave Starbursts, if he didn't cuss in the van, I don't think any of the kids really brought it up. Or if they did, there was like one. And generally, I'm just able to explain, well, it's a little harder for him to sit in van, so we're doing something nice for him. It's a chance for us to practice some empathy. It looks like you're trying to switch it from Reginald's trying to ruin our day to, listen, man, it kind of sucks that Reginald has a hard time being in line. So hopefully that could be a teachable moment for the kid, too, of like, no, it's not fair that he gets a lollipop, but in a way it's also not fair that Reginald's brain works in a different way where for you it's easy to stand in line and be patient, but Reginald's brain is going really fast. And that's another thing I like to do too if I'm explaining to a kid is I don't say Reginald, I'll say Reginald's brain. And that tends to get them pretty interested, like, oh, so Reginald's brain works different than mine. You're telling them something they already know. If Reginald has gathered your interest enough that you're willing to use lollipops as a bribe, it means you probably said the word Reginald stop or Reginald don't poke several times that morning. So the kids already kind of know it. Again, I've just never gotten in trouble with it. Kids haven't gone home and said to the parent, Reginald got lollipops and I didn't, and that's unfair. And then the parent calls me up.
Yeah.
Usually the parent's going to back you up as well. So again, in the education world, it's called differentiation. It's kind of having different approaches.
Yeah. What would you do for kids? So when would you not phrase or a discipline as a positive? So, like if one kid goes over and punches another kid in the nose, I'm not gonna be like, hey, I think maybe you just need to play with this toy. Like I'm
exactly.
Like,
so that's, again, I think a lot of the stuff I've been situating is that 75% of your kids going to be coming in rocking, or 80% or 85. I don't know the exact part. You have this other part in our camp. It's about 24% who are really needing a lot of support, and where, and then, invariably in any group setting, there's going to be that 1 or 2% where it's really unsafe, where it's really not a group fit. For me, that's usually Monday or first day of the group. And it's going to, in the back of my mind, you guys are saying, I'm going to have to call curtain, okay, at the end of the day, and I'm going to have to be like, this is not a good fit for camp, right? Okay. I said okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Both work. As long as there's something after the K.
she likes
That's
it.
okay.
No, she prefers elk.
Yeah, as long as it's not elk.
Okay, I would never make that mistake. I think one of the things I'm doing with that kid, that is just survival mode for me. So I am never telling that kid, hey, at the end of the day, I don't know if you can make it in camp. I want to tell them. I want them to know what's at stake. But that raises the stakes for them, and their anxiety is going to kick in, and they're probably going to act worse. Or they're going to know, oh, he's already decided to tell my mom. You want to hang on to that thing of like, maybe he's not going to tell my mom that I hit so-and-so in the face. Or maybe I can still pull this. You don't want to be like, I'm telling your mom at the end of the day, and there's a good chance you're not coming back tomorrow. If a kid's just punched another camper, that's kind of what I want to tell them. I want them to know I'm pissed, that was not okay. I want to get in their face a little. That's me. Like you violated the safety of this group. You did something that was really not cool. If I tell them that, the things that will happen is either they're going to give up. They're like, oh, this is like what that camp counselor was talking to me last year, and I got kicked out of that camp. So if I'm going to get kicked out of this camp, I'm going to make it worth it. And then your day got worse, right? The second thing they're thinking is, well, what else are they thinking in that? Then the second thing they're doing is then rationalizing. The minute you're saying like, hey, that was not cool, you affected the safety of the group, you're gonna hear, but he did this first. And then all of a sudden, the focus of it, which is don't hit people, becomes kind of a tribunal on whether it was justified for him to hit him. So when you get into kind of explaining and telling the rules and things like that, and explaining why, hey, I'm really upset that you hit that kid, you actually lose your power. And I think a way to do it instead is to sort of say, well, you shouldn't just have it. You can say to him, well, I bet Rob's feeling pretty upset right now because his nose is. They need to know like the outcome of what they did. In that situation, you're preventing them. Your main goal there is to not have them extrapolating what's going to happen at pickup time. They may start to say, are you going to tell my mom about it? Stuff like that. And you need to say, listen, your goal needs to be, let's just get back to doing well. Let's focus on doing well. You focus on what they need to do instead. Instead of going through like why they hit the kid. because then you're just going down that rabbit hole, and they're thinking they can talk their way out of it, and it's almost a trigger. This kid is used to explaining why he's hit other kids or why he's called him an effort or whatever, and that kid in that moment is getting to distract from the fact that he hit the kid. He's talking about, well, the kid first said I did this, or the kid knocked over my lunch or whatever, and it doesn't end well for them. It doesn't end well. You're okay. Then it's okay. Well, he knocked over your lunch, but it's still not okay to hit a kid. Well, yeah, but so your goal is not to talk about what happens at pickup. Your goal is to try to distract and bribe with good things for this afternoon. Hey, that was a really tough moment. I'm really sorry that happened. Let's get back on track. I'm going to have you apart from Rob for the rest of the day because he might be feeling uncomfortable by what you did. Or, and in the back of your mind, you're saying, not rest of the day. I'm going to have him apart for Rob for the next hour because I've already called the parent over here, and the parent's on the way to pick up. Really, you're trying to kind of mitigate crisis at that point, I think. So
you would actually have the kid be picked up. And
I mean, if you punch the kid in the face and it's feeling unsafe, and the other kids in the group feel affected.
Yeah. And then your thing is call for pickup for the day.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
I'm not saying
nothing, and then it's more of a surprise when that happens.
Yeah. Because, and I want to tell the kid I'm mad right now because this other kid's got a bloody nose. I really wish Reginald hadn't punched him. I want to say, yeah, your mom's on the way to you.
Would you tell the
I'm tempted to do
affected
that.
kid that he's going to be removed for the day?
That's a good call. If the kid's really upset and feeling stressed out, definitely. And say, listen, I don't want you to tell any of the others, but this is not okay what happened to you, and that's going to make the kid feel safe. In more situations, you have those times where the parent can't pick up till the end of the day, and it sucks. I've had those times where I have to stall for like 3 hours.
Well, we have our handbook that says that
you get
but still,
it's mandatory.
what you do, I know, but there might still be that's in theory the case,
right?
But in practical, if the parent isn't there, what are you?
I've had very sympathetic
You still have
parents.
to-
Yeah, I've had parents who are very sympathetic to the situation, are really upset at what their kid did, but they are in a meeting in Redmond, they will lose their job, something like that.
Okay,
I've had that happen, and I don't think they're shining me on. I truly think there's some
issue.
Maybe it takes 2 hours or whatever. But yeah, that other kid's safety is totally worth it. And in a way, by you saying, "Listen, I don't want you to tell the others," you are letting that kid know that they have some pretty special information about the situation. You are going out of your way to tell them that the other kid's going to be out, but you don't want to tell the kid who did the punching, because if he knows mom or dad are coming in an hour or two to pick him up, he has nothing to lose. He's feeling stressed or frustrated. He might run off from you. Like his parents are the ones who have to deal with his emotional fallout from it. And that's their job. They're better suited to deal with it. So them showing up, and usually,
And then it's they're here for pickup. It's showtime. Like, would you then lay out like it's not okay to hit people? Like now, parents came to pick up Elka for punching Ian in the face, right? And
He deserved it.
right? And
yeah,
then
get your
now-
forms in on time. She can't do her job.
So they came to pick her up, and then would you then say, like, in our place, this is a safe place for everyone, and by punching, what would you say?
I think in that situation, you got to know the parents are going to be talking to that kid anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Probably if you've done an early pickup that day, the kid's not doing camp the rest of the week, right?
Possibly.
It
could be that it's for the day. It could be for the
my
week.
threshold is much higher, but would you always? I have two boys, they constantly hit each other. And
But they're brothers, that's different.
But they also, and at our camps you get a lot of friends that kind of fight 1 minute and then they're good again the next minute.
I'm guessing he's more talking about where it's like really
No, I was just going
intentional.
extreme.
Okay.
I want to know, because we've phrased so far discipline as reworking it as positive.
Right.
And I wanted to know initially, when
If
would
it's a
you
really
stop?
extreme.
When would you stop framing the discipline as a positive,
and say, you know what you did is completely unacceptable. You're not getting rewarded. You're not getting whatever. You are going over there. You know, like.
I mean, when the parents arrive, I think it's a very good teachable moment with the parent there. Make sure they're not kind of in the main areas of the camp. You're going to have to, you know, and some of it is realizing like. Sorry. Oh, nah.